So in this video, we're going to give you a step-by-step breakdown of both design thinking and the design sprint process and why it's important for you as an up-and-coming designer to understand these processes. Hi, my name is Rob Hamblen. I am a designer or a product designer. I have been for 25 years, and I've had the privilege to work at some companies like IBM, where I was a creative director of UX. I was a senior design manager for Qualcomm, and I was also a product design director for AJ and Smart. So currently I'm founder of my own company called Leap, and we specialize in design thinking and the design sprint. Clients also come to Leap if they have a large or complex challenge that they need to solve. So quite often with the design sprint and design thinking, that enables us to really understand what their core problem is. In this video, we will give you a brief overview of the design sprint and design thinking and why it's important as a junior or entry-level UX designer to know these skill sets. Let's dive in and give you an introduction to design thinking first. So what is design thinking? In my experience, design thinking is a collaborative framework where people come together to try and solve complex problems. First and foremost, they're trying to solve it for the customer. They have the empathy for the customer right at the beginning. Why is design thinking so popular? It's been around for a really long time. You're new into this world of UX and UI design, and what you'll understand is that this will form the foundations for you becoming a really good designer. The reason it's used is because it helps people solve complex problems, but really quickly, but in a collaborative way. So design thinking was first popularized by a company called IDEO. It was around maybe a little bit before IDEO, but they kind of made it more popular. And they had to make it more popular because they wanted their designers to all be working to the same framework and collaborative structure. Quite simply, design thinking is a human-centered approach for solving complex problems, but with the end user in mind. What does design thinking look like? You're probably familiar already with the honeycombs. So typically the 5 steps are empathize, understand, ideate, prototype, and test. Let's take a look at these steps in a little bit more detail. So empathize is where we're trying to really have a closer look at the people that are going to be using this product. By empathizing with them, we're trying to understand where their pain points are, because once we can identify where the pain points are, they might provide us with opportunities of how to help them. So with empathize, what's really important here is that you're not trying to identify solutions at this point in time. It's purely about understanding those users that are going to use that product. Okay, so now let's take a look at understand. So understand is where we try and get as much information as possible and context around that end user. And this is where we could be, for example, looking at competitors within that same space, other existing products, understanding the actual market that you're making this product for. You're pulling in all of that information from everywhere else to give you the broad context of the challenge and what's around it. The next one, ideate. Ideate is where we as designers, this is where we can really start thinking about solutions of how we can help solve those problems. And typically with design thinking, it's about multiple solutions at this point because we don't really know which is the right way forward. We have to make many solutions and then process and then eliminate them. Ideate is the next part where you as designers get to really be creative. You can then start forming your ideas of solutions as sketches, which you would then turn into wireframes. These wireframes will form the basis of your product or concept ideas, which leads you into step number 4, prototyping, because once you've visualized all of those concept or ideas into a high fidelity mock-up, you would then make a prototype so that you can test and get some feedback from those potential customers. A high fidelity prototype, let me just explain what that is in case you guys are new to it. A high fidelity prototype means that you're kind of mocking up a product to look and perform as real as possible. So when we say high fidelity, it just means it looks like the real thing. But even within the design thinking process, it's far from finished. You're just trying to mock something up so that you can get some accurate data from it. So test, this is the final part. So this is when you've created your prototype, you want to gather that data and understand how and where it's either succeeded or failed. What's really important within the design thinking framework is that quite often, once you've tested, you'll need to go back and design, make some changes, and then create a new prototype and then test again. This is what we call an iterative process. And you'll talk to people within the industry when you work on projects together and when you collaborate with people, what you'll find is that you never really come to an actual end of this cycle. It's something that you want to continually strive to perfect. And for example, products that have been around for many years, they will keep applying this design thinking process to their existing products because they want to continually evolve their products and the experience for their end customers. So design thinking, you may have already got the gist from watching this, is about really the empathy for the end user. You as a designer will be entrusted to design experiences or products that are going to really help the people that are going to be using or going through that experience. So why is it valuable for you to learn this? You might think that just being a UX or UI designer means you're just sketching or drawing. But really, for you guys, design thinking must be the foundation blocks for how you become that designer. Throughout your career, you will have more involvement with other teams that are going to be working and using design thinking frameworks. And if you have no knowledge or understanding of how that framework works, then you won't be able to contribute to the projects. So it's really, really important that you start to really understand these 5 honeycomb building blocks, because these will actually help you become a much more proficient designer. So hopefully that's given you a bit more of an overview or an understanding of design thinking. Let us know in the comments if you have any questions on design thinking or any of the processes that I've mentioned. Now let's look at the design sprint and how that relates to design thinking. Okay, so what is the design sprint? So it's a rapid process for testing ideas and validating them with end users. And this is typically done within the space of 4 or 5 days. So I like to think of the design sprint as design thinking on steroids, because we pull many of the components from design thinking, but we compress them into 1 week. The first 2 days are in workshops where you're actually working with the stakeholders, or what we would call the senior team, the people who are most responsible for actually getting that product made. Then after the 2-day workshop, you're then responsible for making the prototype, which is the high fidelity visualization of this product vision. And then on the 4th day, we're actually going to be testing it with 5 target demographic validated users. And at the end of that week, you would then synthesize the data and then play that back to the stakeholder team so that they would be able to make a decision about whether that product should be made or whether it should be canned. So from my previous statement about what a design sprint is, you'll already identify that there's some common terminology or common phrases that we already use from design thinking. For example, define or understand. This is in the workshop part of the sprint where we're trying to understand the challenge or problem that we're trying to solve. So then we have prototyping, which is also one of the design thinking components. And then of course, testing, we have to test and validate with those users. So you'll find a lot of common parallels between design thinking and the design sprint. And this is a common misconception that they are 2 quite different processes, but they push and pull a lot from each other so that you can hopefully achieve the same result. So Jake Knapp is the author of Sprint. He wrote this book back in 2016. And he was actually a senior designer at Google Ventures. And Google Ventures wanted to find a process that would enable them to repeatedly find out if it was worth investing into new companies or new products. So the process itself, Jake didn't really make any of the process himself. He just pulled a lot of these existing processes together as a way of standardizing a format for people to identify whether a product or a project was worth investing in. So the book that Jake wrote, it's really beautifully written. It's very easy to read. It gives you a tangible breakdown of each day, step by step, of how to run the design sprint. For example, it even gives you guidance for creating the prototype, or even how to recruit those user testers so that you can test with accurate people. This is a must-have for any aspiring UX designer. I definitely recommend it. And one thing I would also say is that the sprint, you might feel like, you're a designer. What is this process? What does it mean to me? But actually the process enables you to be a designer. Although it doesn't rely on creativity, it will help you as a designer sketch out an idea to a solution to a challenge. And then you'll go through your design process of actually making it into a prototype and then testing and validating it, which is super important if you want to make successful products. So that's just a bit of a background around the design sprint. I want to mention the design sprint to you guys as a designer, because for me as a designer, and like I said, I've been a designer for 25 years, I wish I had known the sprint back in 2009 when I was making my first app. And the sprint is really important because it teaches you where to focus first. Like if you're designing an app, like they can be pretty big. Like where do you even make a start? So the sprint will help you focus on which part of that product or that app to focus on first. That will give you the maximum results with your potential customers. So the design sprint also, much like the design thinking honeycomb that we spoke about earlier, because everything is so condensed, it will also give you an understanding of like how to research, maybe how to do your benchmarks, which are your competitors. If you're making an app, for example, does anybody else do it better than you? Find out if there's even products that exist, because it could just be that it's not worth you even getting into that space. The design sprint will help you answer all of these questions first, but it will also help you make prototypes on a much more rapid scale. It will also help you identify which questions that you would need to ask in order to validate your business ideas or the product ideas with the people that you're testing with. So this is just an introductory high-level overview of the design sprint. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments below. Or alternatively, follow me at Be The Leap on Instagram, and we have tons of content there for sprints. Let's just summarize where we are with the design thinking framework and the design sprint process. Really, the process of design sprint is something that you should stick to. It's a 4 or 5 day process and it's step by step each day. Whereas the design thinking framework is more along the lines of, you can apply that whole framework at varying stages of a product or product development or product design. And it means that you can interchange components of that, those 5 honeycomb segments, depending on what it is that you're actually doing. For example, it might be that, you've made a couple of concepts, you've tested it, you would then iterate on that prototype and then retest again with it. You wouldn't necessarily need to go back and do the framework. So for example, with design thinking, it might be that you never fully understand the complexities of a solution because you have to keep understanding, keep going back. The more that you uncover, if you're trying to solve a really complex solution, it could be that the more you uncover, the more you have to understand. From my experience as a designer, once I had experienced design thinking and I'd worked on projects where I could really understand and empathize with those 5 honeycomb steps, it means that when you're going for your next job or when you're in interviews, for example, they will ask you what your design process is. And if it doesn't marry up to the steps of design thinking, chances are that you won't get that job. The design sprint for me is so important now. I'm a founder of my own company. Design sprints is one of the core offerings that we actually offer. But for me, understanding the 2 processes and frameworks and somehow being able to also, intertwine them in some instances has also made the products that I'm designing way more successful. Why would you learn more about design thinking and design sprints? These 2 things, these 2 core components will be the foundation blocks to you being a successful designer. And much like I said earlier about the understanding part, you will spend your lifetime as a designer understanding like how you can incorporate these components into your career and into your projects. So this was of course just an introduction to both the design thinking and the design sprint. If you want a deeper dive into both of these areas, CareerFoundry have 2 articles related to both of these topics below. Check them out. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.